Welcome to Crafty Sourcer. If you're looking for a raw, unfiltered podcast on all things sourcing in APAC, you've come to the right place. Grab a coffee or wine and join your host and other guests as we dive deep into the complex and ever-evolving world of sourcing, keeping you informed on insights, tools, and even at times, a healthy sourcing debate or two. Now, here's your host, Denise Pereira from Kaleidosource. Settle in and let's get crafty.
Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 5 of Crafty Sourcer. Now this week we catch up with the one and only Vincent Chi, who heads up a team of sourcers at Adobe for APAC and Japan. Now Vincent is actually one of those people that enjoy flying under the radar a bit more, but unfortunately not today and hopefully not for too long, as we are going to be doing a lot more of a deep dive into his experience around setting up a sourcing function at Adobe, as well as being the data nerd that he is, how he's really implemented talent intelligence at Adobe. Vincent, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be on the show as well.
Now, Vincent, you and I, we've been in touch over the past few months, and this is actually the first time where we are speaking face to face as well. For all the listeners out there, I always ask this question. You obviously started your sourcing journey from Words Group into Adobe. So I'd love a quick intro into who is Vincent and how did you actually fall in love with sourcing?
Yeah, sure. Look, who is Vincent? It's a great question, and it's a long-winded answer in many ways. I think when I first started my career in Australia, it was Woolworths Group. I was the people at the front of Big W store checking bags, making sure no one's stealing stuff. Absolutely sucked at job, so I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. But I then had the many fortunate opportunity to progress my career across the Woolworths function, which touch on both as a graduate, generalist, as a HRBP, from more so the talent end, and last but not least, my last role in my career in Woolies was around all things sourcing. So that's when I had a bit of opportunity to touch on that. And now, obviously, joining Adobe, I wear two hats. First hat, sourcing, leading a team of 4 across APJ, and my other hat is my executive search hat. That's what's hiring for senior leaders across the APJ region as well.
So you do your day-to-day, you wear your sourcing hat on as well as managing a team. So do you get time to do anything else? Or
it's a bit tricky. Sometimes I wake up and I'm thinking, hey, beyond these two hats, what other hats I'm wearing? But I absolutely love it, right? I think just like you, people who love sourcing, we can stock down and what can we share back to the business as well.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned when you were doing the whole checkout thing at Big W, it actually reminded me of what Coles and Woolies have installed recently about when you go and check out and it turns green or red, depending on if you've paid and now the camera's on you. It's so weird, eh?
It's manic. I used to man the self-serve checkout. Again, I'm so bad at it. Maybe that's why they got me out of the job, but it's just a manic time overall. And now, I don't know if you saw, they're wearing body cams.
Yes, I read about that. It's ridiculous.
Well. So it'll be,
Well, we're glad you're in sourcing because we definitely need a lot more sources and good sources in our community. So I guess in some shape or form, it actually really worked out for you and for Big W.
Sure.
I love asking this question, and I believe that we all, even though we're all part of the same community, everybody's got their own perspective and perception about what sourcing is. So, what is sourcing to you when you put your sourcing hat on, or when you started your journey into sourcing? What is sourcing to you?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I think sourcing has been evolving in the past few years, and whoever I speak to around sourcing, to your point, there's a bit of a slight interpretation across everyone's experience. For me, there's probably 3 main pillars for sourcing. One, it's obviously from a technical perspective, we are here to function as almost like an internal SME agency where we are able to identify very hard to fill roles. The second part of sourcing is the proactive side.
Yes.
So how do we get pipelines, unlock top of funnel activities through events, engaging people out there? It's on top of our list. And last but not least, it's the area, selfishly I'm most passionate about. It's the insights, data, but beyond that, the consultant part of sourcing where
Yeah.
we become business advisors through data insights and partnership with the
Mm.
business
Mm.
overall. So, yeah, hopefully that's a good summary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the part where you spoke about being advisors, because we are. Through our advisory, we form our partnerships,
Yeah,
right? With the recruiters, with the hiring managers, even with candidates. Because when we're talking about the proactive side of it, we're not necessarily talking to them about a specific active role right now. It's about that nurturing of those relationships, right? So we become advisors to them about what the market's looking like, what's happening in Adobe per se. So I love that point about being advisors, and I think it's becoming more and more critical for companies and other functions to start seeing sourcing as that value add to the business, and not a function that's actually looking to step on other people's toes. You know.
yeah, I 100% agree. I echo that. I think traditionally there's still some sourcing function seen as more a junior
Mm,
recruiter, which we're still seeing a lot of cases, examples across large scale businesses
yeah.
as well. But there's so much value we can add, and I think part of our journey it's helping the business to understand what we
Mm,
can do
mm, mm,
that they haven't seen before from a
mm.
sourcing function as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about the value that a sourcing or a sourcer can bring, it's enormous. I mean, if you take your experience in terms of you being a sourcer yourself and then moving into a role where you're setting up a function, I mean, the value must be like ginormous, right? I mean, enormous. Sorry,
Yeah,
ginormous is not even a word. Probably, I just made that up on the
it could be a
fly.
word. It could be a word. I 100% agree. I think one thing I always share with the business is that in recruitment, for example, as one of the lenses,
Mm,
um, our business see the people who are interested in joining Adobe already.
yes.
So
Yeah.
they don't see the top of funnel approach. So if we think
Oh.
about that cliche iceberg, iceberg photo we
Yeah.
see in every presentation, the
Yeah.
business sees this over the water level.
Yeah.
Now, what the
Absolutely.
sourcing team does, it's all these.
Mm, mm,
What's underneath the water, it's a wealth of data, insight,
yeah.
interpretation that we
Yeah.
can bring back to the business to kind
Mm,
of hire better candidates as
mm.
well.
And your point on the data thing, data data, and I always say I just go back between data data, the word. It's so fundamental, especially when you're leading a team of sources, when you have to show their efforts, the productivity that's happening in the back end. The only way to sometimes show it is through the insights, right? Because the teams are not always about the hiring for now, it's the hiring for whenever
Yeah.
as well at the end. You're managing sourcing initiatives for Adobe within, APAC and Japan. So that's a massive remit. I always say Japan is a hard market to tap into. I also know you're quite the data nerd. So let's talk a little about how has Adobe introduced, or how have you rather introduced talent intelligence into the sourcing function?
Yeah, I think we're on a journey to
Yeah.
do it. We've started it, and we're continuing to identify what's important for the
Mm,
business as well. So, to your point, APAC, Japan is such a unique region in the sense that
mm,
every country has such a strong cultural norm.
absolutely.
Japan being very agency driven, Greater China having data protection legislation,
Yes.
all the way to Australia, New Zealand, which is what I was born to. It's almost like my home around recruitment.
Yeah.
Every country is so different
Hmm.
way. For us, what's really important as part of our journey is to really taking a step back, understand what's a priority for the business in terms
Mm,
of insights, what's the priority for the business in terms of sourcing. So
hmm.
starting by simple questions around, hey, what's on your mind? What can we share back
Yeah.
with you to start building a level of partnership,
Hmm.
which then leads to us showing the business building a level of case study around what we can do
Mm,
in a way where we're at now in terms of journey. I
mm,
think we have quite a bit of momentum around talent intelligence,
mm,
what this means for the business and what we can do
mm,
as
mm.
a function. So it's about, I guess, scaling it so that it's part of our regular muscle. Um,
Excellent.
it's very similar journey, I think, to AI,
Mm.
although
Mm.
not at the scale of it. When
It
AI
needs to be.
came out, everyone's like, "Holy shit!" But what does it actually mean, right? So
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
start experimenting it in their own way, and that's same
Mm.
as talent intelligence. Is that okay? Cool. This just came out, but can we do this for this? Can we do this for
Mm.
that? And
Mm.
once we kind of get our head around, hey, what we can do, that's when we start really focusing on optimizing it by
Yeah.
focusing it
Yeah.
on the right priorities.
Yeah.
Well, so
Absolutely.
yeah, that's kind of where we've been up to
Yeah.
team overall.
And how are you sort of optimizing it? Is it based on like I'd imagine it would be a phased approach as
Yeah.
well. And is it based on like different parts of the sourcing process that's happening, or is it built in towards the end of a
Um,
sourcing process?
that's a great question. And I think that's something we're learning along the journey is that
Mm.
uh, there's so many different components of talent intelligence we can
Yes.
tap into. So there's your recruitment, conversion funnel,
Mm.
all the way, and that's probably from a rec perspective,
Yeah.
all the way to your enterprise level, like your location,
Yeah.
strategy, your executive movement, what does that mean?
Mm.
M&A of competitors,
Mm. Mm.
and you adding economical and political landscape, that's when it starts
Wow. Yeah.
getting super cool around what does this actually mean
Yeah.
for us. And to answer your question around, I guess, recruitment specifically, one of our focus is to map out what can we share across the different journeys of
Mm.
recruitment. Probably to your point around different regional nuances and
Yes.
Japan being such a different country, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
how do we make sure our leaders across the globe who's hiring someone in Japan understands that and
Yes.
respect the culture of Japan
Absolutely.
around recruitment, right? And
Yeah.
also understand what they're actually leaning into
Yeah. Yeah.
sits in our top of funnel
Yeah.
all the way to in the middle around, hey, what is our conversion
Mm.
funnel, and all the way to the end when recruitment wrap up, it's around
Mm.
what's some of our learnings, what
Amazing.
does it take to implement on what's next for us as well.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you mentioned that with the business, when there's like, as an example, cultural nuances, you'd probably use a lot of that sort of data that's coming back and also educating the business around that. Because what we are used to seeing doing, you have to you have to sort of shape shift your approach according to where you're going, what markets you're going into, what are the cultural differences in there. And instead of candidates and the market sort of changing their approach, it's how we have to change our approach as sources, as recruiters, as a business, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And the way I've been positioning to the business is that, and as an example, right, is that a lot of Japan candidate may not speak perfect English
Mm.
because Japan is, well, I guess being a country itself, your mother tongue
Mm-hmm.
it's a language everyone speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the what that means is that when they come across in interviews, they may not be able to communicate effectively in
Exactly.
English speakers, but that is not an indication of the level of capability of each
Exactly. Spot on.
where we're interviewing. So even something as simple as that, helping the hiring manager understand
Mm. Mm.
upfront
Mm.
reduces the risk of us losing out on very great potential talent
Mm. Mm.
simply because of language barrier that's
Yeah.
existing as part of the
Yeah.
process.
And I think it's so important to put ourselves in their shoes. If I was a hiring manager and if I was going into a market that I'm not familiar with, I would also think about the fact that if I am speaking almost perfect English to someone who doesn't speak English as clearly as I do, how uncomfortable am I actually making them? They're
Yeah,
already nervous, but I'm also making them very uncomfortable because they already feel like they don't speak the right amount or the right sort of accent, I guess. I don't know how to say it, but
100%.
yeah. So I think this is where the biasness creeps, and this is where that whole education piece sort of comes in. And I think this is much more of a detailed conversation around that. But it's very important because I remember, and I brought this up in one of the other podcasts when we were going into when we were doing our go to market for Japan at Zendesk. We had to be very, very intentional with what we were doing, how we were doing it, and also change some of our tactics around that. And I remember for our Singapore office, we were hiring someone where they needed someone based out of Melbourne, but they needed someone who could speak Japanese because that person would be interacting with the Japanese market. And as part of the interview, we got someone from our Singapore office who actually understood Japanese,
Wow.
and they were part of the interview process, and that was not to say this person is right or wrong, but just to say, okay, can this person speak basic Japanese? Can they understand each other? And that was just like a maybe a 20% of the whole interview process from there. But we have to be mindful. We have to be so mindful of what we are doing, and why we're doing it to begin with. And I think having something like talent intelligence, knowing what your markets are, what you're going into, the sort of market you're playing into, will change a lot of and influence a lot of those outcomes eventually as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Mm,
Yeah, and
mm.
that's a great idea around, showcasing that we respect and understand other people's culture. Because
Yes,
at the end of the day, we are a global business.
exactly.
APAC, we're an APAC region, not an
Mm,
Australia
exactly.
company, right? So having that understanding, it's extremely important.
Yeah. And when you started your TI journey, and obviously you're sort of still going through that, what were some of the considerations you'll have to take into account? Like, let's talk about some of the tools that you're probably using in the back end. Is it more, LinkedIn Talent Insights, or have you all created something from scratch for yourselves that's more, customized to what you all are doing in Adobe?
Yeah, I think it depends on what exactly we're solving for. And I think
Mm,
comes back to the priority of the business as well. So, for example, if I think about more at the enterprise level, we recently opened up a Thailand office, and
nice.
part of the Thailand office work is actually before we go into recruitment, spend some time unpacking what's the market like,
Mm,
what are we actually leaning
mm,
into and facing into as well. So we use a variety of tools to pull out data, anything from hey, what is the job board
yeah,
common use, right? Is
yeah,
it LinkedIn or is it SeekDB? Like, which one is it?
yeah.
What is the candidate behavior
Mm,
in Thailand as well? Are people more like a lifetime in the same company type of candidate, or
yeah.
are we dealing with more, I guess, the Western world where
Mm,
people will move more
mhm,
frequently
mm,
in
mm.
terms of their companies? And all these elements helped up build out essentially what we call personas of
I
each
love it.
role. So
Yeah.
each role we're recruiting for, we're able to build out three personas, and we're able to do, the other part of sourcing, which is the pipeline proactive mapping that feeds into these personas.
Mm,
And what we can then do is that, well, what we did do is have a very streamlined story around to the business that, hey, this is what you're leaning into around the
mm,
data.
mm,
That is why these are the people you're seeing. These are your
mm.
options, A, B, C. And as an outcome of it, we have reduced significantly time to fill
Yeah.
across the office, across all the hiring for the new office as well. So I guess it's one of the many things that we're excited
Yeah.
about scaling this
Yeah.
capability. But in terms of tool, again, I'll say it depends
Mm,
on whatever situation we're in. But I will say 99% of the time, it's about thinking outside the box and
mhm.
think about what are some resources out there that's available, as simple as Googling
Yeah.
what is the Thailand market like?
Yeah.
It's something I don't think we do often enough,
Mhm,
uh,
mhm.
and it's just one of the many ways we
Yeah.
look into this as well.
Yeah. You mentioned out of the box, and I guess my next question to you is around, in terms of what, ever since you've set up a function at Adobe, is there any strategy that's particularly been innovative or successful for you? And what was that strategy? How was it successful? And I'm asking a couple of questions in here. And
Yeah,
how did you sort of measure the ROI for that?
yeah. I think I love out of the box in many ways. I
Mm,
think it's especially important for Adobe because when we drive diversity, when we foster a diverse environment, it fosters innovation at the end of
absolutely.
the day. And one of our vision for executive search is that we hire someone from a few more different backgrounds, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
in the executive team in Adobe, traditionally, probably 5, 10 years ago, people we get, it's probably from the same four companies of tech MNCs out there. And what
mm,
that means is that we start repeating the same behavior and pattern, and we never have a level of disruption, a healthy level of disruption across the business. Now, what we've done quite purposefully across executive search is that we use data to try influence this to get out of the box
mm,
people. And some of the data points we use are, hey, where are the current tech MNC execs coming from?
mhm,
So
mhm.
before they join tech, what is their industry? And
Yeah,
having that data point, it helps our business understand that, okay, if this company can hire someone who's progressing quite well in their career, why
yeah,
can't Adobe do it?
yeah,
As
exactly.
well. And that has led to, I guess, the more recent hires of our senior leadership team
Amazing.
didn't come from the, I guess, more the norm or traditional box
Yeah.
of senior leaders we will usually hire from. In terms of, I guess, to your point around ROI, there's, I guess, many ways. Again, we can measure it depending on what exactly
Mm,
solving for. So the Thailand piece of work, I guess one of the ROI you can look at its time to fill. Uh,
mhm.
Having the data pipeline upfront, we greatly reduced it. The other piece we could look at it's potentially agency saving as well.
Yes.
Having all these pre-work done as an internal
Mhm.
recruitment function, we have a need to go out to agency to lean in for support as well. So
Bravo.
I think many points we can look into, and it's an ongoing thing for us to quantify so we can show the impact
Mm, mm.
of intelligence.
I love that. And I know this is a very left field question. You said you wear two hats on. One is where you're managing the team, you're setting up the function, or you've already set it up. The other is the exec search. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, I love both. I love my team. So I have four amazing human beings.
Mm,
Two are in Sydney and two are in Japan. I think the most exciting part for us uh, as a team is that we're doing something a bit different, a bit disruptive
mm,
in the business. So we as a team gone through, or it's currently going through the journey of no one knows, well, like very little people know what we can do to the
mm,
point
mm.
now where people are understanding, okay, let's go to Vinny's team for this,
Yeah.
or hey, this should be part of our BAU. So having gone through that journey with your team, it's a great sense of accomplishment because of, I guess, their resilience, their way of showing vision,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and their way of adapting to change
Yeah.
as
And
well. But look, executive search hat is just as fun. I think for me, one of the biggest benefit of executive search is just connecting with leaders
mm,
across
mm.
the region, across the industry, and also connecting with our global team
Yeah.
as well closer in the space. So yeah, love them both. Yeah, it's been a very fun
But
time.
you love the team side more, right? Because you,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I kind of give it away because when I talk about the
Yeah.
team, it's a
But
well,
but
well,
I love what you said because it goes back to your earlier point around being those advisors, getting that buy-in, having that equal seat along with the recruiter, because in some functions where you have a recruiter and a sourcing function, sometimes the sourcer doesn't have that equal seat and they are probably the last people to know what the hell is going on. So this is such a good example of how you can change that around through data
yeah,
and actually be seen as an advisor. And the fact that the business is now coming to you for certain things where they may not have, if probably, TI was not implemented or data was not the first thing that, y'all were bringing to the table either. So
yeah,
well done on that.
no.
Um, my last question that I always tend to ask is that, what are your top three tools or platforms that you find indispensable for sourcing and should be in every either sources or recruiters toolkit?
So for me, given that I'm very, very biased to the consulting, data, and partnership part
Mm,
of sourcing, I think one key capability to have, and stop me if I'm not answering your
mm,
question,
mm,
but I think one key capability, finding the data you
mm,
need. So not everything exists on LinkedIn Talent Insights, and there's
mhm.
so many more data that exists beyond it.
Yeah.
Second part, once you have the data, have a think about how you can build a story around it. So there's a book I read called Idea That Sticks. It shares a lot around how we can all be better
Mm,
doing
mm,
storytelling. And when you are good at storytelling, or when you can build a narrative,
mhm,
that's when you're able to land your ideas really well.
mm.
Last but not least, know your so what. So
Yeah.
you are, to your point, we are partners to the business. We're driving recommendation, we're driving actions for the business. So yes, you got the data, you
Mm,
convince the business. Now what?
mm,
What
mm,
is the recommendation? What is
mm,
the action that we want to do? And loop back
mm.
on that as well. And that's probably to your point around ROI, is that that's probably the best way one can showcase
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah. Nice. And I'll go back to your data point as well, is that go back into your database because there's nuggets sitting in there. Like instead of investing sometimes into, expensive platforms and analytics and stuff, look at what you've already got at your disposal. Start playing around with that before you start looking outside. Look inside before you look outside. And is there anything else you want to add on to the data point? Like, database being the first point of call or anything else on top of that?
Yeah, I think it's all about what you want to build out
Mm,
at the end of the day, and definitely look. I'll say one thing is we can be at time quite confined looking at recruitment, people
yes.
related data. I think there's so many factors that comes beyond that. For
Hmm.
example, in Thailand, when we launch it, we know the government launched a recent policy that focusing on Thailand technology startup.
Mm,
That's
mm.
why we have such a boom of technology,
Yeah.
great talent out there.
Coming
So
through.
when you are
Yeah.
able to showcase that almost elevate you beyond a recruiter or a sourcing partner,
Mm,
becomes like a true holistic advisor
yeah.
to the business.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Vince, this has been phenomenal. And you know what? I think you and I can just sit down and continue talking about sourcing and, what's working, what's not working. But unfortunately, we have come to the end of the time. And thank you so much once again for saying yes. We will drop in, Vince has got a couple of links that we can share, which we will share next week. So, Vince, once again, thank you so much for giving up your time and spending some time with Crafty Saucer and talking about what you're doing at Adobe. And good luck with everything. I'm really keen to catch up next time and hear how it's all going.
Awesome. Thanks
All
again
right.
for having me as
Thanks,
well. Thank you.
everyone, and stay crafty. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. If you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, happy sourcing and stay crafty. Until next time.